Administration is reclaiming America's heritage as the world's greatest spacefaring nation. The essence of the American character is to explore new horizons and to tame new frontiers. But our destiny beyond the Earth is not only a matter of national identity, but a matter of national security. So important for our military, so important, and people don't talk about it. When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal. It is going to be something so important. General Dunford, if you would carry that assignment out, I would be very greatly honored also. Where's General Dunford? General? Got it? Let's go get it, General. In space, so important.
Temporarily. Comrade, I'm coming right up into motion to stop.
Well, there it is, a Space Force. But it begs the question, if NASA has no way to launch an astronaut into space, exactly how are they going to do it? Is there something they have we don't know about? So we don't get a shuttle, but the military gets a mini shuttle, the X-37B. Now, some may have heard of the Solar Warden program, a secret space program that has been in operation for years. All the missing money, 21 trillion, I think, but there's no way to verify it. Of course, there is a lot of photographic evidence of the TR-3B. Of course, we have no proof of what they have. Only time will tell what has to be disclosed. So, get your popcorn ready. We're going to take a little journey back in time to see how we got into this mess of NASA unable to take an astronaut into space.
So on behalf of the 8th expedition to the International Space Station, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to NASA today.
The shuttle's chief purpose over the next several years will be to help finish assembly of the International Space Station. In 2010, the Space Shuttle, after nearly 30 years of duty, will be retired from service. Our second goal is to develop and test a new spacecraft, the Crew Exploration Vehicle, by 2008 and to conduct the first manned mission no later than 2014. The Crew Exploration Vehicle will be capable of ferrying astronauts and scientists to the space station after the shuttle is retired. But the main purpose of this spacecraft will be to carry astronauts beyond our orbit to other worlds. and vision for future exploration. We will build new ships to carry man forward. Our third goal is to return to the moon by 2020 as the launching point for missions beyond. Beginning no later than 2008, we will send a series of robotic missions to the lunar surface to research and prepare for future human exploration. Using the Crew Exploration Vehicle, we will undertake extended human missions to the moon as early as 2015, with the goal of living and working there for increasingly extended periods of time. And they have served us well. With the experience and knowledge gained on the moon, we will then be ready to take the next steps of space exploration, human missions to Mars and to worlds beyond.
Central Florida faces an uncertain future with major changes underway in the U.S. space program that focused world attention on this beach resort area for more than half a century. And one man who knows NASA well is Murphy Wardman. He worked for General Dynamics for 37 years, developing some of the heavy lift rockets that took the first U.S. astronauts into space and eventually to the moon. He's worried about what comes next.
And I've got one son-in-law that's just been laid off. I got another son-in-law who's going to be laid off. I got a daughter who's going to be laid off.
Wardman is one of several retired space engineers who volunteer at the Space Walk of Fame Museum in Titusville across the Indian River from the Kennedy Space Center's iconic Vehicle Assembly Building.
The monument to what used to be. The monument to how America used to be.
Wardman says he thinks the U.S. space program took a wrong turn back in the early 1970s when it turned away from further development of deep space missions.
We're already on the moon. We already had the capability. Today, we can't get anything anywhere.
Wardman and other former space workers supported NASA's Constellation program that planned to establish bases on the moon to carry out a mission to Mars. But President Barack Obama canceled that program last year in favor of a decades-long plan that envisions trips to an asteroid and to Mars. Wardman does not think that will ever happen.
The Constellation program was our best hope, and it got canceled.
Element of the American character.
I am 100% committed to the mission of NASA and its future.
Obama's goal in this trip to the hallowed Kennedy Space Center was to quell a political storm that erupted when his administration decided to cancel a program run by the space agency NASA, aimed at returning astronauts to the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Many critics, including first man on the moon Neil Armstrong, said the U.S. would no longer have the right stuff and lose its edge in space to rising powers like China. Politicians of both parties attacked the plan, saying it would cost jobs in their states or congressional districts. But Fly Me to the Moon isn't on Obama's playlist.
I just have to say, pretty bluntly here, we've been there before.
50 years ago, John Kennedy set a bold goal in a time of intense Cold War rivalry.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Obama
go for main start.
In the meantime, though, the U.S. Space Shuttle fleet is due to be retired this year. That means that when U.S. astronauts need to visit the International Space Station, they'll be in the embarrassing position of having to hitch a ride on a Russian rocket. Not exactly what Kennedy had in mind. Robert.
CLS is go for auto sequence start.
And we have a go for auto sequence start. Discovery's onboard computers have primary control of all the vehicle's critical functions. 20 seconds. The sound suppression water system has been activated, protecting Discovery and the launch pad from acoustical energy waves. Go for main engine start. Start. 2, 1. Booster ignition. And the final liftoff of Discovery, a tribute to the dedication, hard work, and pride of America's Space Shuttle team. The shuttle has cleared the tower.
This is Mission Control in Houston. The Space Shuttle now rolling over onto its back with a 10-minute ride into orbit. Discovery now making one last reach for the stars.
Liftoff for the final launch of Endeavour, expanding our knowledge while expanding our lives in space.
Houston, Endeavour, roll program.
Roger, roll, Endeavour.
Houston is now controlling.
Today, America's last space shuttle makes its final flight.
This is the last of the last of the last.
We have one last chance to see her through the eyes of those who know her best. It's an exclusive inside look at the end of an era.
We have main engine start.
A time for reflection.
It's in the human spirit to explore, and the shuttle's allowed us to do that. It's an amazing feat of engineering.
And a celebration of the craft that has shown our planet and our universe in ways barely imagined 30 years ago. Today, a remarkable era of exploration comes to an end. After Atlantis takes to the air, there will be no more space shuttles. Someday, mankind may build a better craft for bringing humans and cargo back and forth to space, but that's a concern for another time.
The thing that comes to mind always is Star Trek, to me. You look at the crews and the languages and the cultures and the food that they eat, and it is truly an international space station. It's wonderful to see.
Now the French are flying to the station with their vehicle, the Japanese are flying to the station with their vehicle, of course the Russians are flying to the station with their vehicle, and we're going to do it one more time.
This will be the last time NASA launches astronauts into space for many years to come.
Atlantis Launch Director, on behalf of the greatest team in the world, good luck to you and your crew on the final flight of this true American icon.
Hey, thanks to you and your team, Mike. The shuttle's always going to be a reflection of what a great nation can do when it dares to be bold. We're not ending the journey today, Mike. We're completing a chapter of a journey that will never end. You and the thousands of men and women who gave their hearts, souls, and their lives for the cause of exploration have rewritten history. Let's light this fire one more time, Mike, and witness this great nation at its best. The crew of Atlantis is ready for launch.
Has occurred. Solid rocket booster nozzle steering check and work.
20. 15.
Go for main engine start. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. The final liftoff of Atlantis on the shoulders of the space shuttle. America will continue the dream.
Roger, roll, Atlantis. Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis. The space shuttle spreads its wings one final time for the start of a sentimental journey into history. 24 seconds into the flight, roll program complete. Atlantis now heads down, wings level on the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Space Station.
Runway inside, Houston. Discovery, we copy.
Landing gear down and locked. Main gear touchdown. Kevin Ford now deploying the drag chute. Nose gear touchdown. Discovery rolling out on runway 22 at Edwards Air Force Base, California, wrapping up a 5.7 million mile mission to resupply and fortify the International Space Station. Tim Kopra home after 58 days in space.
Wheel stop.
Copy, wheel stop. Welcome home, Discovery. Congratulations on an extremely successful mission, stepping up science to a new level on the International Space Station.
Undocking confirmed at 12:52 a.m. Central Time, 1:52 a.m. Eastern Time, as the Soyuz and the International Space Station flew 254 miles over far eastern Mongolia. And this is a view from the Soyuz as it backs away from the Rassvet module of the International Space Station. Again, undocking occurring on time at 12:52 a.m. Central, 1:52 a.m. Eastern Time. Yuri Malenchenko, the veteran Soyuz commander in the home stretch of his 6th flight into space, is now setting the controls on board the spacecraft from the undocking set of commands to the different set of ballistics commands that will set the stage for the deorbit burn that will begin the trek home for the Soyuz. The deorbit burn scheduled 2 hours, 22.5 minutes from now. And there you see touchdown. The soft landing engines firing right on schedule. Touchdown confirmed at 7:51 and 36 seconds p.m. Central Time. And as advertised, Gennady Padalka, the world's most experienced space traveler, first out of the Soyuz capsule, wrapping up 168 days in space during expeditions 43 and 44.
Внимание, открываем.
Good ride. Team, congratulations. Thank you very much. Best ride I've been on ever. It's just been fantastic from start to finish. Tim, I mean, it's a life-changing experience. It's overwhelming, really, to feeling a lot of dizziness, a lot of vertigo and stuff. But on the whole, doing okay. Yeah. Because of fire, you go through the plasma phase.
to wait a little bit longer to get that video signal, and almost as if they read my mind, there we see the Soyuz spacecraft under parachutes. And touchdown. Landing confirmed, 2:37 a.m. Central, 3:37 a.m. Eastern.
Ребят, давайте подтянемся чуть-чуть. Да, зайдите, как самочувствие, еще раз подтвердите. Борис, помощь нужна?
To exit. Finally, 70 centimeters above the ground, the 6 retro rockets fire to further reduce the capsule speed to approximately 5 kilometers per hour. The capsule hits the ground, but the crew's seats continue moving down, and shock absorbers help to make the landing softer for the crew.
The soft landing is not really soft. You prepare for it by putting your arms against your body, not touching any of the metallic parts, all your books against you. You're not talking, not to put the tongue in the middle of your teeth, and you're laying there trying to be as inside your seat as well as you can. And you're waiting for this soft landing to happen, which for me felt like a head-on collision between a truck and a small car, and of course, I was in the small car. So when this happened, it was like, bada boom, everything shook. I was kind of checking in there, everything was saying, and then silence, everything was stopped. So I looked a little bit around, I looked at my crew members, and then I said, hey guys, welcome back to Earth.
Once landed, one of the first actions of the crew commander is to release one of the two ropes that connect the capsule to the parachute. This is important as, in windy conditions, it prevents the capsule from being dragged away on the ground by the inflated parachute.
Continues. Some members of Congress want to end America's reliance on Russia for trips to the International Space Station. Last week, the House Appropriations Committee passed a spending package that includes an increase in funding for commercial space flights to the ISS. It's now expected the U.S. will no longer need to rely on Russia's Soyuz capsules beyond 2017. Proponents of commercial spaceflight heralded the increased spending, but say more is needed to end the reliance on Russia. So should the current tension with that country hasten the move toward commercial flights? That's our topic this half hour, and we invite you to weigh in on our Fox 26 Facebook page, or you can send me a tweet at Sally Mack, Fox 26. In our newsroom, our legal analyst Chris Tritico, news analyst Mustafa Tamiz, and public policy analyst Jackie Bally. All right, what do you guys think?
Well, first, a huge mistake was made by the Bush administration when they chose to cancel the space shuttle and go to a system of private funding before that was even close to being completed, and caused us to rely on Russia. I know we've been trying since the end of the Cold War to have better relations with Russia, but they're not our friend. They never have been our friend. They never will be our friend. And so ending the space shuttle before we were ready to move into a new situation, Jackie Bally, was a huge mistake. And President Obama had the chance when he took office to say, no, we'll keep the space shuttle going, and he chose not to. Both presidents, I think, made a huge mistake.
Well, a lot of the things that we're overlooking is that Russia relies on us for a couple of things too. They rely on us for electricity, for our solar panels. A lot of the instructions that they're hearing is coming from the command center in Houston. So both countries rely on the other for many different things. And you have to think about this. We give them $71 million per seat. And so from an economic standpoint, it's going to be very difficult for either country to try to break ties at this point. And the two presidents, when they tried to make a combined effort to try to say, look, for our space program, let's try to work together, they were looking at it from an economic standpoint and trying to save each country a lot of money.
And that came back to haunt us. Looking at this to save money, now we want to sanction Russia for what it's doing in the Ukraine. And at the same time that we're putting on sanctions, we're paying them hundreds of millions of dollars a year to ferry our astronauts.
Now, the bulk of this program was to show that if they start a space fleet, that NASA is incapable of doing it. But if they come out with hidden or suppressed technology and show that they already have one, or maybe they just release bits and pieces of it. Whatever happens, Trump is a man of his word, and he's going to do what he says. It is my hope that we don't militarize space. I mean, to think that on our first attempt that we're going to build something bigger and badder than whatever else is out there is kind of crazy. But the military seems to have control of everything. And somehow I pray for cooler heads to prevail. That could be all of these triangle traps that's being videoed could be the Space Force. And they're going to come out with some disclosure on it. But what NASA's got going on will not cut it.
Welcome back. The U.S. is one step closer to having its own Space Force. According to documents obtained by Defense One, a defense news site, the Pentagon is moving ahead with President Trump's plan to create a new military branch without congressional approval. That draft was supposed to be sent to Congress today, but was instead delayed following the leak. Deborah Lee James, the former Secretary of the Air Force, called the Space Force a bad idea earlier this week. So is it just a new, expensive, and useless government project, or do we actually need to start thinking about a big world war in the heavens? Let me ask theoretical physicist Dr. Michio Kaku. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Kaku.
Glad to be on the show.
The idea of space exploration is exciting, but space fighting seems really counterintuitive.
Yes, but a war in Congress is shaping up over a war in outer space with the battle lines hardening up. On one hand, you have the former Secretary of the Air Force, an Obama appointee, and the Air Force bureaucracy, fearful that it's going to lose an arm or a leg when the Air Force is created.
Because the Air Force is essentially in charge of all of our military space.
Right, that's right. 35,000 military individuals that are tied to the military program in outer space. And so the Air Force bureaucracy is fearful of losing a huge pound of flesh to this new Space Force. On the other hand, you have the Trump administration saying that for the first time since 1947, we're going to create a new branch of the military with a timetable. By the end of this year, the beginnings of a space command are to be set up. By the middle of next year, hiring will take place to begin to fill all these positions, to begin to create a space operations program to buy satellites, and to begin war-fighting strategies.
Wow. So what is driving
really
this?
Fast.
I mean, obviously, this is not just the United States unilaterally dreaming up some cool uniforms and application of technology. Clearly, there are other actors that we are racing against.
That's right. There are pros and cons. On the pro side, we have the fact that, well, let's not be naive. The Chinese, the Russians, they already have space weapons. 10 years ago, the Chinese blew one of their satellites right out of the sky, demonstrating killer satellite technology. And then Vladimir Putin in March advertised a new weapon, the hypersonic drive, which can maneuver and evade a Star Wars program.
Wow.
So on one hand, there could be a traffic jam in outer space as more and more countries put military hardware where their mouth is.
But won't they just aim them at our satellites that we're so dependent upon?
And that's the con side. The fact that we have an Achilles heel. Who's most dependent upon satellites? We are, not the Russians, not the Chinese so much. We depend upon satellites. If a war were to break out, it's like a gunfight where somebody throws sand in your eyes in the opening shots of a war. We have the most to lose if war breaks out in outer space.
Oh, Dr. Kaku. I mean, it's interesting. It's scary. I hope the private space exploration is what keeps this from being way too expensive, but we shall see. That's another conversation for another day. Thank you for being here.
Right.
Space Force, headed by Dr. Michio Kaku. How delightful.